Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the Oakland A's? And we're doing pretty well at saving the A's here in 2044, a 61-30 record as we sit here on July 11th, up 11 and a half games on the Rangers in the American League West. And we are up a game and a half on the Boston Red Sox for the best record in baseball. So things going pretty well so far. The focus of this episode is going to be the first-year player draft. We previewed it at the end of the last episode and have gotten a lot of good feedback from the worldwide scouting department that we're going to be talking about shortly as we focus on the draft. Before then, though, I did want to update the viewers on one trade that I've made since the last episode. We've been talking a lot about needing to upgrade center field, potentially. Definitely the biggest hole in our lineup as we sit here on July 11th, and we've only got less than 3 weeks until the trade deadline at this point. That being said, there's no one particularly appealing as a center fielder on the trade block, and I have done some player searches for center fielders in general, even if they aren't on the trade block. Clearly some players who could help us in that category, but the price for some of the better center fielders in baseball that their teams don't really want to trade are prohibitive. So at this point, as far as center field, we've got a few decent guys in the upper levels of our minor league organization who may be able to help us come September in playoff time. A couple of them, unfortunately, are on the IL in the minor leagues right now. But for the time being, we're just going to continue running with what we've got. Still got 3 weeks before the trade deadline, as I noted. So there's certainly time for additional teams to fall out of contention, the prices of some of the players available to change, and us to continue to decide if it's time to potentially promote somebody from the minors or make some other changes within the players that we have in our organization right now. So our trade did not involve center field, but it did involve a reunion with a former player of ours that we traded away this past off season, and we're talking about last episode, the 30-year-old reliever Jonathan Scherer. We didn't really want to move on from him. He's had an outstanding career for us in Oakland with a 2.93 ERA over 356 innings out of the bullpen, 144 ERA plus, and a 78 FIP minus while he's been with us. But he was heading into his final arbitration year, set to make $6.2 million-ish this coming season. So we traded away him with some other players to clear some salary on our team for next year, or for this season at this point, thinking that we couldn't really afford a $6 million reliever who wasn't our closer, given that our budget remains tied for 27th in all of baseball. That being said, we have reunited with Scherer, and Arizona is going to retain the rest of Scherer's contract for this year. He was on the trade block, so I'm assuming that means that Arizona is not really in it. Yeah, they're 19 games behind the Dodgers in the NL West, so a solid reliever who has actually been their closer this season with 20 saves, not really necessary when he's in the final year of his contract and headed to free agency and your team is out of it. Had to give up a couple of interesting-ish players for him, but not anyone that I'm really going to regret missing. Kevin Pulley is a decent outfield prospect. Started the year for us in Double-A and hit over 300, and was also hitting well over 300 in a few weeks up in Triple-A. I think he can be a solid major league player. 24, almost 25 years old. We picked him up last offseason. He was all we could get, if you'll remember, for Dave Baumler, our long-term number 5 starter, who the Astros apparently ended up cutting, and we signed again as a minor league free agent this year. But Pulley, almost 25 years old, hasn't played for us in the majors yet. Decent profile, but certainly more of a fourth or fifth outfielder with the talent that we have at that position. And then a minor league first baseman, Jesus Vallejo. I think his bat could also be an interesting major league bat. He's put up a really impressive 186 WRC plus for us in A-ball this year. But he's not good defensively, doesn't have a ton of speed. All he is a bat, so he's a pure first base / DH type, almost 22 years old, and we hadn't promoted him above A-ball. So in our stacked minor league system, he was not one of the top prospects. So felt like even though it's just going to be a 3+ month rental of Jonathan Scherer, albeit hopefully with a long run through the playoffs, we're not going to let Vallejo or Pulley keep us from getting a deal done. So Scherer is back on board to bolster our pitching staff, and he's plugged right into a setup role where he has been pretty successful for us over the years. We're also going to use him as a specialist against right-handed pitching if we ever need that from time to time. He is devastating against right-handed batters. So happy to have Scherer on board, even though we will almost certainly be moving on from him again after this season, given that when we are talking contract extension with him, he's looking for about $13.5 million a year for 4 years, which again is way more than we can afford for anyone but a closer, and probably more than we really should be paying for a closer given our payroll. So with Scherer on board, we will turn our attention to the first-year player draft. We have the last pick in the first round this year at number 35, and no supplemental picks this year. So we've got a few players that we're thinking about selecting now. Got some good advice from the Worldwide Scouting Department that we'll talk about, but it's quite likely that of the players we're talking about, our only shot to get any of them is right now. At the end of the last episode, I indicated that the starting pitcher, Grayson Cook, was probably my favorite pitcher out there, and the Worldwide Scouting Department tends to agree. Scott Donovan and Coach 1549 both have him at the top of their due draft list. And Raphael 17 and Paul West both like him best among pitchers, although I think they'd prefer we go with a position player. Fury Cook's stuff could be absolutely filthy. Average movement and above average control if he completely develops. Potential 5-pitch arsenal, like the high loyalty and work ethic. And love that he's an 18-year-old who's already throwing in the mid to high 90s. Definitely the top pitching prospect out there in my mind, and he's set in the mock draft to go with the 4th pick in the 2nd round. So if we don't grab him now, probably not going to get another chance at him. And we may be able to say the same thing about some of the position players that we're going to talk about, although with some of these guys there is a chance that they fall to us in the 2nd round. Brad McCarty, a prospect that I really like. He's Coach 1549's top pick among position players. Very well-balanced bat with well above average contact and above average home run power if he fully develops. Does have the high work ethic and looks like a solid defensive outfielder prospect. He's set to go early 3rd round, so there is potential for McCarty to drop to us in the 2nd round. And I think I could say the same thing about Jeremy Bennett, although I'm not quite as confident about him. The two-way player, potential real interesting bat, and the pitching stuff, really interesting, although his movement and his control both at this time look like their ceiling is below average for a major leaguer. Really good stamina, really good at holding on runners. The lefty, oddly, did not go in the first 5 rounds of the mock draft. I am pretty confident he's not going to last for several rounds. I think there's a chance maybe he falls to us in the 2nd round. But Bennett was not my 4-ply's top choice, and certainly another guy that we're thinking about. But along with Cook being the clear number one among the pitchers, we do have a clear number one with the worldwide scouting department among position players, and that's the center fielder, Pat Hameter. Avery Shayam, DLL first base 14, Ray Fell 17, Paul West all had him at the top of the list. Scott Donovan, who preferred the pitcher Cook, had Hameter number 2 overall and top on his list of position players. Like the durability and really like the bat. He can be above average at everything if he reaches his full potential. Middling speed, middling defensively, but still a left-handed hitter that we think could be pretty good. And Hamister was projected to go with the 25th pick in the first round. So as I think about the 4 players that were most highly regarded by the worldwide scouting department, Hameter already projected to be off the board. Bennett didn't show up in the mock draft, but I think he's going to go relatively soon. Brad McCarty made it to the top of the 3rd round in the mock. And as we talked about earlier, Grayson Cook went with the 4th pick in the 2nd round. So in theory, if we want Cook or Hameter in particular, our only shot at them is probably going to be right now. Although I really like the pitcher Cook, I think I can make some chance that he lasts to the 2nd round and becomes an incredible bargain for us, even though I think it's unlikely. There's no way in my mind that Hameter is going to be around. He was my favorite position player when I did my quick review in the last episode. Obviously, I've spent a lot of time offline with the draft over the past, 30 hours or so since I did the last episode. And as I talked about earlier, Hameter, also the choice of the worldwide scouting department. Scouting director recommends Hameter as well. His bonus demand just $1.3 million. We're short of money this year, so that could certainly help us. We are going to go ahead, meet Pat Hameter's demand, try to bring him on board, and we'll hope that a Bennett, a McCarty, or the pitcher Grayson Cook falls to us in the 2nd round, although I think one of those guys will probably be on the board, most likely probably McCarty. I think the likelihood of Cook is very low, and I think Bennett probably somewhere in the middle. And as we sim forward, Bennett is off the market, the two-way player. I did, as I mentioned earlier, expect that he would probably go earlier than the 6th round or whatever the mock draft crazily had him going. So the interesting two-way player off the board, McCarty, as I hoped, is still around. We'll check whether the pitcher Cook is. I'm guessing he's not. Yeah, Grayson Cook also off the mound. Freddie Everding, pitcher who we did like, still available. We'll go and take a quick look at where the guys that we've talked about previously went. We talked about Joe Madrigal last episode. He went with the 3rd pick in the 4th round. Grayson Cook, as we mentioned, was projected to go with the 4th pick in the 2nd round. He lasted just a few picks longer to pick number 7 with the Padres. And then Jeremy Bennett, the potential two-way player, went with the 16th pick in the 2nd round to the Cleveland Guardians. So didn't necessarily expect that either of those guys were going to be around for us in the 2nd. Obviously was hoping that one of them would fall to us, but not to be the case. Although I do like some of these pitchers, I'm not in love with them. Not going to go with the impossible to sign Jaquan Allah yet. As you can see, we've only got $7.4 million to spend, even though we did get a little bit of money back in the Scherer trade. So probably still have to try making our decisions on a budget. And I think I'm leaning towards McCarty right now, but want to do a little more work offline before potentially making a rash decision. And as I think about things a little further, I think I'm going to break Coach 1549's heart here and not go with the guy he wanted me to pick in the first round, even here in the second. I like Brad McCarty a lot. I really hope he somehow lasts to us in our late third round pick, although I'm certainly not expecting that will happen. But given that we just brought another outfielder on board and we're pretty deep in the lower levels of our organization, the outfield, Freddie Everding was my second favorite pitcher behind Grayson Cook. Love the personality with the high leadership, adaptability, and work ethic. Good stamina, great at holding on runners. Potential 4-pitch arsenal with 3 pitches that could be borderline world class. Only think the movement and control are average, but the 17-year-old left-hander throws in the mid-90s and certainly has an interesting skill set. Our scouting director recommends we go with Ty Ranaka, who you may remember was one of my least favorite of the higher-rated prospects out there, simply because of his very mediocre defense, his poor speed, and a bat that is okay, certainly if he reaches his full potential with 70 contact and 60 home run power, could play in the major leagues. But the likelihood of reaching his peak in both of those numbers and combining it with gap power and an eye that we think will both be below average just is not that exciting to me. We are going to go with Everding right now, and we're going to hope that someone interesting will still be around for us in the third round as far as the batters. And McCarty is still around, so I do like his value here in the third round. As I mentioned earlier, he was projected to go with the 6th pick in the third round, but I think there's much better value here now. Love the fact that we're going to ultimately end up pairing him up with Hameter in the first round and Everding in the second round. Scouting director actually recommends the go with McCarty here, looking for a little more than slot, but I think we do have the money to afford that with the fact that Hameter was very reasonable to us in his demands. So we are going to go ahead and bring Brad McCarty on board here. Sorry, Coach 1549, if I made you squirm a little bit with the way I did this, but we got the guy ultimately, and I think it's pretty good value here in the third round. And it does look like Everding, only looking for $240,000, pretty reasonable as well. So Everding and Hameter both well below slot. Certainly makes up for Brad McCarty being above slot. I know there's probably several of you out there who watched the last episode and have thought about it that are hoping we're going to go with the impossible to sign Jaquan Ala soon. Certainly one of the more interesting bats out there. I just don't think there's any way that we're going to piece enough together, anywhere close to enough money to actually bring him on board. But he's certainly the most talented player with the most upside out of anyone out there. So if he's lingering in the fourth round, there's certainly a argument to be made to give it the old college try. And Ala is still around here in the fourth round. So going to be an interesting decision. Pitcher-wise, Juan Rojas was one of the top-rated pitchers back when we talked about this in the last episode. Still on the market. The issue with Rojas, similar to Ala, is that he's impossible to sign. Really like the profile, but just don't know if it makes sense to try to bring him on board quite yet. And we're going to avoid the impossible to sign guys now and go outfield pitcher. Edgar Castro, 18-year-old, still on the market. Only a potential 3-pitch arsenal right now. Do like his stamina and ability to hold on runners and think he could be a good, solid, left-handed major league starter if he reaches his full potential. No guarantees that that's going to happen, but for the fourth round, he's pretty interesting value. Ed Autry, is the recommendation of our scout. And I think our scout has overdosed on something to be making the recommendation that we pick up Ed. Autry in the 4th round. So we are going to go ahead, bring Mr. Castro on board, move forward again. Looks like the impossible to sign pitcher has gone off the market. Batter-wise, the impossible to sign Ala also went off the market as well. So 5th round, we'll have a decision to make. I guess there is still one big-time impossible to sign player, catcher Mike Miller, who certainly has an interesting profile. We still could try to bring him on board if we want to bring on a impossible to sign player, but going to spend a little time thinking more deeply about things before we make a decision. And here in the 5th round, we're going to make a value pick with a guy that we talked about last episode. We weren't in love with him, but first baseman J.J. Hagan was supposed to go to us with the 32nd pick in the 2nd round in the mock draft. So to have him still on board in the 5th round is definitely interesting. I know Hagan was mentioned by a few members of the worldwide scouting department as a 3rd or 4th kind of choice among the different position players that were out there. Don't love that outside of the home run power, the rest of his bat looks pretty average. But he is durable, high adaptability, awful in terms of his speed, and the glove is just brutal. No real potential for him to be anything except a DH, but if he really does develop borderline world-class home run power, I think he could certainly work as a DH, and he's good value here in the 5th round. Our scout recommends starting pitcher Tavian Polkovich, left-hander with a potential 3-pitch arsenal and a certainly respectable profile. If Polkovich lasts until the 6th round, certainly would be on our short list then, but I think Hagan is the value play right now, so we'll bring JJ on board. Still have the impossible to sign catcher Mike Miller, as well as the college catcher Bobby Paxton, who's somewhat less interesting to us out of Baylor. Pretty average defensively, does have some positive personality traits. I think the bat could be interesting. I guess, when I started talking about him and was kind of mad about him, it's because I've been looking at him since the 2nd round. But as a 6th round pick, Paxton probably deserves some serious consideration. Pitcher-wise, does look like the guy who was recommended to us last round is off the books. So we'll continue doing a little more investigating and make a decision. And our scout continues to try to get fired by continuing to recommend Ed. Autry, who just do not know what his fascination with this guy is. The OSA doesn't think he's that special, and even our scout doesn't think he's that special. It looks like the bat is a below-average major league bat, and although he's got nice range and is good at turning too, his error rating and his arm both below average, not that fast, not a good bunter. Even in the 6th round, not great value. We're going to go with Bobby Paxton. I mentioned I was probably too negative on him because I was still thinking about him as a potential 2nd or 3rd round kind of guy. But as a college player in the 6th round, even though his glove as a catcher does not look exceptional, a left-handed hitter as a backup catcher can sometimes give you a little more flexibility in terms of the lineup. And we do think that his contact, his home run power, and his eye could all be well above average. Certainly more developed than the high schoolers that we've brought on board. And we're going to go with Paxton here in the 6th round. Fortunately, he was only looking for slots, so no need to add any more additional money to bring him on board. As I mentioned, Hamiter and Everding, both well below slot with what they were asking for. McCarty, Castro, and Hagen, all a little bit above slot. We put those offers out there to them. So financially, we are in a pretty solid position. And if I do anything interesting in the last 14 rounds of this draft, I'll certainly let you know. And even though we're going to have to spend a little bit of extra money to make it happen, I do like a guy who's available here in the 7th round. Another outfielder, center fielder, Mike Fieldin. I think his bat could be slightly above average, major league bat. He's got potentially very good outfield range, high adaptability and work ethic, and also excellent speed, excellent bunter. He is looking for $800,000, so he's not one of these guys who's just going to sign for slot. But we've got extra money left over, as I said, because the first and the second rounders were so cheap. Not necessarily enough to go after an impossible to sign guy like Mike Miller, but I think Fieldin here still represents good value. Scout recommends the shortstop Sergio Bernal. Don't hate his profile either. If he's still around in the 8th round, certainly might think about going after Bernal. But right now, Mike Fieldin, the center fielder, is the choice. And in the 8th round, the infielder Bernal is still around. Like the work ethic, the glove is kind of okay. Durable, and we think his bat could be a useful major league bat if he reaches his full potential. I don't think he's a superstar, but do think that there's a little bit of value here in the 8th round with him. He is, however, looking for more than slot, so he's a guy who might last a little bit more. And I actually prefer another outfielder. I know I was talking not too long ago about not taking an outfielder in the 2nd round because we had so many of them, but I think the value's just there with some of these guys. Tim Petrillo is an 8th round choice. Durable, really good personality, looks like a corner outfielder. Another guy whose bat is borderline interesting if he reaches his full potential. I'd love it if Bernal lasts another round, but I do prefer Petrillo a little bit more, so we'll draft Petrillo. And Bernal is now off the board, so we'll have to think about a different type of decision at this point. And we've continued to move along in the draft down to the 13th round, and Ed Autry is still being recommended by our scout, so certainly more reasonable value for Ed Dot here than when our scout started offering him or suggesting him to us much earlier, but still not a guy that we are going to go after. We've added one more player since the last time we talked, another outfielder, of course, looking for more than slot. So the fact that we saved some money on the first couple of players has allowed us to, in the 7th, 8th, and 11th rounds, bring guys on board who are looking for actual bonuses. So the money will all kind of balance out. Jeff McDowell, like the personality with the adaptability and work ethic, decent speed, decent glove, potentially good contact hitter. Don't know that he really ultimately ends up being a major league hitter, but as an 11th rounder, felt it was a chance we were willing to take. And we've made it to the 16th round, and although our scout, who is a bit schizophrenic with his recommendations, is no longer recommending Ed Autry, here in the 16th round, given that he does have that real interesting range, we're going to take a flyer on him. Really don't think the bat is going to be anywhere near major league quality, but at the very least, he could be a defensive substitute with that really good range in the lower minor leagues for us. And we didn't do anything all that interesting in the final rounds of the draft, so when all was said and done, very focused on outfielders and starting pitchers. The center fielder Hamiter, starting pitcher Everding, right fielder McCarty, starting pitcher Castro, and the first baseman Hagen were our picks over the first 5 rounds. supplemented by the 3 outfielders in the 7th, 8th, and 11th rounds who were looking for more than the nothing that OOTP has attributed to players in rounds 6 through 15. So the draft is over. If you've got thoughts on what we did, would love to hear them. Obviously, our record is no different than it was at the start of this episode, 61-30. Next time around, we'll be playing through the All-Star break, finding out how many All-Stars there are on the Oakland Athletics this season, and we'll continue to monitor our center field situation, monitor the trade block, and see if, in addition to the acquisition of Scherer, there's anything else that we need to think about doing to shore up this roster as we try to position ourselves for a three-peat here in 2044. Until our next episode, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.